screen, which will kind of give you guys something to look at besides me. All right, you should be able to see that, right, guys?
Yep.
TRC top 10. So, Kristen, if you want to kind of kick us off, we'll get started.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our call. I'm Kristen Dorr. I'm a lighting consultant with TRC. I have been a member of IFMA for 2 years now. Our first year was just a member attending meetings, and this year we decided to be a sponsor. So that's why we are presenting to you today. We have 2 specialties within TRC, and we'll briefly go over our history real quick, and then we'll dive into some important questions about lighting design, and then also regulated waste. Jake, do you have the screen?
Yep.
Also, since it's just 2 of you joining this morning, I would enjoy it if you could unmute yourselves and participate in our presentation if you wanted to, or if you had any questions on the fly, please feel free to do so. We just wanted to make this an open forum and friendly for everyone who's joined today. So we came up with top 10 questions for lighting environmental, and we thought that these would be useful for you while you're out interacting with your clients or within your buildings every day. So hopefully this is useful for you.
Yeah, so my name is Jake Andrist. I'm the sales and marketing manager for the Retrofit companies. And just kind of touch on a little bit with everybody else on the call here. So Madison Ananik is our marketing director. So she put this nice slide together and does a lot with helping communicate our messaging out to the general public who may not always live in this world that we live in, or these worlds that we live in, because they can be complex in many ways. So hence why we have the other 2 gentlemen on the call, Steve Jacobs and Digger Anderson. So Steve Jacobs is our environmental compliance manager, kind of oversees all of the safety and regulatory things regarding all the waste that we accept, how we accept it, how we transport it, how we manage it, and where it goes for proper disposal, and making sure that everything is handled properly and in compliance and to the level of satisfaction of our needs and our regulators' needs beyond our customers' needs. Steve, do you care to elaborate any more on that? How long have you been in this industry?
Well, I started in '92, so it's been, I don't know, I have to do the math, but it's been a while.
28, 29.
Long time, but it's still fun. So yeah, I'm here as a resource for anybody. Obviously today I can speak to Jake's outline and get you some answers or point you in the right direction if you have any environmental questions.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And then Digger Anderson is also on the call. So he is our project development manager, kind of oversees on the lighting division all of the auditing process, the audit verification, specification of technology. He decides kind of what is the best route to go for what brands we represent and what kind of we carry, who's going to support us, and kind of helps guide our sales team like Kristen to help inform you guys as customers and people wanting to implement lighting projects. He helps to kind of educate our lighting consultants to the options available. So Digger, do you care to elaborate a little bit more on that?
You nailed it.
Okay. So Wendy, thanks for joining us. We're just getting kicked off here. As you can see in the slide, we're just a little brief history about us. We are the Retrofit companies. So we started in 1992 as Lighting Retrofit in Owatonna, Minnesota. And primarily doing just that, retrofitting old technology like HID, high pressure sodium, into fluorescent. And then obviously as that lighting technology has adapted, we've followed along with that technology, upgrading into current technologies. Then in the mid 90s is kind of when we got into the environmental division. So some might find it odd that we do lighting, design, and implementation, and also do regulated waste disposal and recycling. But kind of how that started was about the mid 90s, if I'm right there, Steve. They started regulating all the old PCB ballast and fluorescent lamps and some of the different old lighting technologies. Basically at that time through just over the course of that time frame, we've started our own environmental division, and Steve's been here since the beginning of that. So with that, we've kind of fast forwarding now to where we're at today. We've expanded into lighting design, LED, more complex lighting solutions, and that it involves a lot more things than just a basic fluorescent. And then on the environmental side, we've gotten past, went from lamps and ballast to now we do full-blown business closure cleanouts of hazardous chemicals, tank neutralization, and waste disposal. So pretty much all things regulated waste. Everything from a light bulb to unknown chemicals. So we can help identify and properly dispose of those things. And then as we look to the future, we're obviously looking at ways to stay in front of the technology and the regulations. So that's kind of where Digger and Steve come in to stay in front of what's going on, what's the trends, and that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. When it comes to different needs that you guys might run across in your facilities. So again, just to kind of reiterate Kristen's point, we'd love this to be interactive and for you guys to engage. We want to be available here for you as a resource, so Steve and Digger can answer all things regulated waste and lighting specific. So just feel free to holler if you got a question. So and with that, just kind of this touches on our both divisions. I kind of mentioned all the things that we do, so I won't get into this too much, but basically highlighting our lighting side. And one thing that makes us different and unique is that along with the design, we do full turnkey implementation. So we know everything from the design all the way to install, recycling, rebate fulfillment, and everything in between. On the regulated waste side, again, everything from light bulbs, batteries, all the way to business closure cleanouts, tank removal, cleaning, anything you could imagine regulated waste-wise. So with that, I'll hand this back over to Kristen, and you can take it from here.
So we came up with a few questions for the lighting side of this, and we wanted to make it a little bit more generic and maybe think about, what kind of questions do you have? So we came up with just a few points. If there's anything in addition to it, just feel free to ask. But, one of the questions is, what are the most popular and recent lighting technologies out there? And I would think that the most recent, especially with COVID around, is the disinfecting lights. There's a UV version compared to an LED type of solution. And we can have maybe Digger go into some specifications or some detail about that. But we have two options. The UV lighting, they're saying that it helps get rid of viruses in addition to other germs and bacteria. There's some mobile cart options if you didn't want to install it in the ceiling, which also comes with controls. And then there's just a version of the LED solution, which only kills bacteria and some other germs. Microbial type of solution. You see that on a lot of fabrics. Tunable lighting controls is a huge thing, especially with an educational vertical, but we're also seeing it as an important aspect within the office setting. There's a lot of people who get really picky about a certain lumen output or a certain Kelvin temperature, and we're seeing that these are valuable for those spaces so people can cater to their own needs or adjust certain conference rooms to a certain level or comfort level. And you can kind of see it in the picture on the right. Every brand will vary a little bit, and we can guide you through that process if you have a certain brand specification or type, but it can be as far as 23K all the way up to 65K, and it's within one single fixture, and it's a fluid tunable type of solution. One of my favorite technologies, actually. Comes with simple control, so nothing too invasive. And then there's also asset tracking and wayfinding, and you see this. This is very popular within a hospital setting most of the time. So if you wanted to find your way through a certain wing, or if you wanted to highlight it, each level by color, or have anything connected to a smartphone or a tablet, you can find, you can find your way through the building. You can also find things like hospital beds or wheelchairs, or even in school settings, maybe you wanted to find a certain classroom or whatever it may be. Those solutions are available. It's real. A lot of people are engaging with those type of technologies within the community. So we just know that we have the solutions available and the knowledge behind it to help design it. And that's where Digger comes in.
Yeah, so just kind of touch too on some of these technologies. The big thing is making it smart spaces, right? So a lot of businesses are looking at different ways to make their technology or their their lighting or their other functioning pieces of the building more effective at different things. So the tunable lighting, yeah, it gives you that flexibility in a space to change the mood, change the environment. And Kristen mentioned in an educational facility, this could be this is really popular in like special needs rooms, but also in an office setting. Everybody prefers a different setting. Some people are more prone to headaches, or LED light can be it can affect people differently. So as with fluorescence, but there's just different things that this allows, that customization of the workspace. And then things like disinfecting luminaires, that's obviously a big thing now, is cleaning that space, not only making it a smart space, but a clean space and a safe space. So the lighting, the options of being the UV technology, which is a lot more intense, and different factors that can go supplemental to the luminaires or the fixtures that you're using. And then, as Kristen mentioned, there is, some less intense versions that you can actually kill some bacterias out of your LED light. And then the asset tracking is a way to, it's big in hospitals, to find things that are in a large building, big things like, where's that crash cart, or where's this wheelchair, things like that you can tag and use in your grid of your, your light fixtures, using that as your grid to locate different things. And then another thing that's really popular right now, you guys might be aware, is, in the HVAC area, is, cleaning that air that's coming in. And Digger, if you wouldn't mind touching on it, this is something that we're, as a lighting company, it's not specifically to, this technology isn't specific to lighting, but it is in the it does fit the retrofit realm, the ionization technology through HVAC. So there's obviously a air cleaning opportunity, increasing that safety of that space, but also there's some energy value as well, making that HVAC system run more efficient. Digger, do you mind just touching real quickly on just the high level of that?
Yeah, I think where we kind of got started to look at it a little bit is it does have, as Jake mentioned, the energy, saving capabilities, where you're not having to clean coils or having to pay someone else to come out and clean your coils on your, whether it be a rooftop units or your full-fledged facility, HVAC systems, where we can tie that into our proposals with some partners that we work with. But really what it is it's way above my knowledge level of the stuff, but there's kind of a couple different ways they're going about it. The one that we looked at a lot of UVC stuff originally for targeting that, which is more in the lighting realm, to kill the virus and bacteria, but that seems to be a lot more costly and a lot more maintenance. But there is products out there from multiple manufacturers. Was it needle point bipolar ionization? There's that technology, and then there's some other I don't even remember how to say it, photo hydroionization, I think, is the other version. A couple different ways that they're attacking it, and basically from the layman's terms is they're introducing ions into the air which attract particles and make them easier to filter out through the filtering systems, or fall to the ground where they can be vacuumed up in theory. Obviously, you're not seeing any of this happen, but you can see it in the clogging of your filter. That there is plenty of white papers out there and studies that have been done to show the effectiveness of these technologies. Like I said, I'm not in an HVAC world, not pretending to be. We get tied in on the energy saving aspect of it and the, I'd say, electrical aspect of it. Right? You need to power these things to feed them. So inevitably, our electricians would be called in, and the projects we're specifying them in. So we may get tied in even if we're not technically part of the HVAC, part of a project where we're there doing the lighting. They may ask us with our electricians to come in and tie these solutions into the project as well, and capture some of the energy savings, which I think has been showing up in a lot of scenarios, up to 25%, that this can help on your HVAC or cooling. And it's killing viruses and disabling them and bacteria. And some of the technologies are even doing that not only in the air, but on surfaces as well. So lots of information out there. That would be a quick snippet of it.
Thank you, Digger. So again, if you guys have questions, please just jump in. Otherwise, we can kind of, we'll keep going for the sake of trying to cover all this. So then I guess I can kind of just kick off this one. So, what our approach to things is to start the project process is a lighting energy study. This is kind of something we'd recommend to look into to get a full, educated, detailed, layout of a plan. And Kristen, feel free to jump in here too. But this is kind of our approach to it as compared to what could be out there before. Now, do you guys, anybody on the call, anybody have you guys, any of you guys implemented lighting upgrade projects? And what has been your approach to projects?
Well, this is Dave. We at Pearson just recently did a retrofit project, actually replacing overhead light fixtures, and went to the LED fixtures throughout our office space. So we just completed that here within the last, 8 months, I guess. So this is kind of a review for me about some of the things that we went through, and it's just helpful to, see what your approach is.
Yeah, so Dave, I imagine somebody came in and they walked your facility and kind of laid out some level of detail for you to kind of make a decision.
Yes, basically I had provided fixture counts and identified the different types of lighting that we had. Most of them were 2x4 fluorescent fixtures, but we also had some can lighting and some down lights and things like that that had to be addressed as well. And then, like you said, after I had provided that inventory, or at least the initial snapshot, then there was a walkthrough to verify the numbers and see what exactly was going to be needed.
Yeah, Dave, that's a good approach to kind of get the ball rolling. I mean, that's kind of where, that's kind of where you can go in, kind of get at least a good count, a good starting point, and then get that verification level. That's kind of the big thing, is that a lot of the times we see that misstep is verification. So you might provide a count, and if somebody doesn't go through and make sure that that count's right, or that technology that, you as a, you might not be a lighting expert, even though you kind of got an idea of what the fixture types are. So it helps to have somebody that's knowledgeable in the industry to come through and verify those types of things. And then I imagine you got some sort of energy analysis or some sort of savings potential that they kind of provided you with. I guess I should ask, did you do it in-house, or was it, did you have somebody come in and do the implementation piece?
We had someone come in and do the implementation, and they had done all of the analysis as far as what the savings would be. And we actually got a pretty healthy rebate back from Xcel Energy once the project was done.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. So that's really like we look at it. That's our approach to things too. And we go through our project development team really focuses on those details of the plan ahead, the savings potential and analysis. You know, sometimes photometrics are valuable, and then that rebate fulfillment and those rebates running those through those programs. So,
So Jake, I think I would just maybe give a suggestion that if others are looking to implement a similar project, just make sure that when you hire someone to do your energy study, or sometimes it's referred to as an audit, a lighting audit, just make sure that they take their time and they run through the building completely, and maybe oftentimes take some fixtures apart to see what the aperture sizes are, the wire connections, have them check the switching. It's always important too, just to check light levels and verify that type of solution. And if they file for rebates, make sure that you see that they filed it actually with their utility and just didn't make an assumption, because in the past we've seen other contractors just maybe overshoot or overestimate the rebate amount. So that definitely affects your project costs. And if you ever have any kind of electric bill, always forward that on too, so that if you're comparing energy metrics of some sort, that utility rate is accounted for, that you're actually being charged and it's not just an estimate. So those would be my tips to you whenever you're looking for assistance with that design and install implementation.
Perfect. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, I mean, definitely the more detail that you go in and provide to get into the accurate numbers, and that's going to be the better. So,
Dave, is there anything that you wish would have gone differently for your project, or anything that you learned having done the retrofit in your facility?
Well, we had a few stumbling blocks as we went through. It took several days to kind of get into a groove where the installers would come in and remove the fixtures without disrupting employees, because this was back prior to COVID kicking in and people not being in the office. So we were trying to schedule the work where it would be least disruptive to those people who were on site. And of course, kind of cleaning up at the end of the day, that was another stumbling point that we had. Oftentimes, we'd get complaints from our employees. I'm a facility manager, so we'd get complaints from our employees that, there's dust all over my desk, or this or that or other things. So I think after several days or a week into the project, we had identified a number of things like that we needed to improve our process and make sure that these things were taken care of and anticipated before the fact.
Sure. Thanks for that feedback. We've definitely heard that before from other customers with other projects, and that's definitely something that we take as very important feedback for our customers. We hear positive feedback on some of those things for our projects, because we know that that's really important to customers. So it's interesting to hear you share that.
Yeah, and Dave, as a facility manager, you know that if a paper got moved or something, you're going to hear about it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And we'll kind of keep moving here too. Kristen, go ahead if you want to.
This is a question that often comes up, especially with those who probably haven't even engaged in this type of project in their building yet. But how much does a retrofit cost? And it's always an extremely hard question to answer, because we are not just giving a bulk price as an estimate, or going to give you the price per bulb, so to speak, because every space is so different. Every building has a different square footage. The ceilings are different. The type of technology, how new or old it is, the wiring can be different. And so I would just say be cautious if someone does give you an estimate upfront, a ballpark estimate, because most likely it's going to vary greatly. There's a lot of variables that go into a retrofit cost. It's not just new construction that we're talking about, where you can, possibly estimate your price on the gamut of variables. But just be cautious of someone giving you a cost, because you really can't get that answer unless if you do some type of energy study or facility assessment or an audit.
Yeah, sometimes those details that we just discussed in the kind of that audit phase or that study phase, you know, the more detail you can get in there, the more accurate you can get that estimate to be. But yeah,
And I
we
would say maybe don't be scared of doing an assessment or a walkthrough or an audit, because I think you'd be surprised at the type of funding you can receive, and we can talk about that in a later bullet point. But there's so much out there that's going to support you with this project. A lot of communities are striving to be efficient, and I know that probably a majority of you know that in the city of Minneapolis, they're requiring it to be code or be LEED certified at some point. All buildings to have an energy assessment done to their building. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go into it as well too. So, you know, Dave, are you in Bloomington? Is your building in Bloomington?
Yes, the site I was referring to is in Bloomington, and we actually have a site down in Owatonna too. So I was interested to hear that you got your start in Owatonna.
Yep. We have one location in Owatonna, then the other in Little Canada here, just kind of northeast of St. Paul.
Sure.
But yeah, so Bloomington, as you might know, if you've done anything exterior wise, they're very strict on the code for what's allowed for exterior lighting. If you haven't done that yet, that'll be something you're going to want to, make sure you approach with a good plan and make sure that plan gets submitted to the city. In many cities like Bloomington, like Kristen mentioned, Minneapolis has certain criteria that they're going to expect from a level of different initiatives, whether it be like ASHRAE compliant or just city code. I know Robbinsdale was another city, Plymouth. We even got into some more rural cities as well. We're starting to get pretty good expectations from a code lighting kind of city code layout. But a lot of those things factor into what is the thing going to cost. And then obviously we talk about technology too. So Dave, did you guys do, since you're willing to tell us all about your project, did you end up doing just a relamp with LED lamps, or did you do new fixtures or combination, or?
Most of it was replacing the fixtures. So they took down the 2x4 fluorescents and recycled those, and then they dropped in new panel, I'll call them LED panels, that installed right into the ceiling. And then there were some bulbs that were actually replaced with LED bulbs in like the can fixtures and things like that.
Sure. So, yeah, that's a good combination. With those types of technologies can vary in cost too, not only for the material but for installation as well. So just different things to think about there. And then turnkey. So, what did we call that? No, Dave, you had said you had somebody come in and do the install for you. Did they, by chance, do the rebate paperwork for you as well?
They did not do the rebate paperwork, but they provided us with, sorry about the noise in the background here. My wife's taking care of our grandson here today. So
No problem.
they basically provided us with the listing of all the equipment that was installed in the building and gave us what we needed to submit that. And then we actually lease our space in Bloomington. So our landlord had to submit the paperwork to Xcel Energy because they hold the account for the electric in the building.
Right.
Okay, thanks you for sharing.
Yeah, I think it's important that you at least explore the options too with other contractors to help file that type of paperwork. It takes a lot off your plate, because when you're submitting something like that, it takes invoices, spec sheets, a lot of the comparison of existing metrics compared to the proposed, finding the right contacts. And so finding a contractor that can do that for you exists, and it's available.
That would have been nice.
Yeah, the turnkey piece is just, if you can have, as you with any, you look at a new construction project, if you're ever been involved in anything like that, typically there's a general contractor that's really kind of the go-to for that's the rest of it, and just having that one go-to, I think is really important to, if you're going to do projects, even retrofit projects or relight or renovation projects, having somebody that one go-to to help to know that everything's going to get taken care of and they're kind of going to implement it at different levels and manage the project for you. It helps to some of that off your plate as you still have your other tasks to do, you know, beyond the lighting project that you took on. And then the final little slide for the lighting side. Kristen, if you want to take this one too.
Yeah, so like I was saying before, there's a lot of options to help fund a project. Xcel Energy always has a great program, so if you're in their territory, I think it's always a bonus to explore the options that they can provide to support your project. They do have bonus rebates at the moment, but I think we're running really tight with trying to capture those because we need to you know, do a site audit, get material ordered, and have everything installed before that deadline of December 1st. But their rebates are continuous. I think just sometimes we caution to maybe explore a project earlier than later, just because they're always changing year to year, and we never know if it's going to be better next year or maybe not as great next year. But there's always a program through Xcel Energy, and even other local utilities too. They do fund a lot of lighting improvement projects. 179D is a federal tax incentive. It's available only till the end of 2020, and I believe you can capture any type of HVAC or lighting improvement up until I think it's like maybe 3 years prior to. But there's also something else called cost segregation, and that's available at any point. So if you have any interest on that, we do have resources to help introduce those incentives to you and can help file those. Minneapolis has a grant through their benchmarking program. We cannot apply at the moment, but I do believe that they will be extending this program into 2021. So they'll fund up to 35% of project costs in certain areas. Other times they'll fund up to 25%. And you can capture this and double dip, so to speak, with the Xcel Energy rebates, which is amazing. For one of our projects that we recently completed, there was over $200,000 in rebates and grants combined to help fund the project, and the bottom line cost was only pennies, so to speak. So that's available. And there's always a way to finance a project, and we partner with someone who finances energy efficient improvements, and the APR is usually 3 to 4%. However, right now through Xcel Energy, if you qualify for a certain program, they will fund it for 1% as well. So we keep up to date on these type of solution incentives, just to make sure that your project is supported, and you know, you get a better payback. So we'll always go to bat for you on this, but always make sure that someone else, if you're working with someone else, that they can capture something like this for you.
Thanks, Kristen. So that kind of, you know, kind of sums up kind of what some of the top 5 things that we hear a lot when looking at projects. You know, how do I get started? What do I need to know about? How do I help pay for it? You know, what are some problems that come into play? What are some things to be aware of? With Digger here, obviously as our kind of specification, kind of lighting industry expert, he's LC certified along with other lighting certifications, really our go-to for different lighting technologies. Katie, do you or Dave have any questions regarding lighting that we can answer? Anything specific? Or are you guys, you know, you feel pretty confident on what, or do you care sharing any other feedback on projects you've had, or?
This is Dave. I guess I don't really have any other questions, and that's really the only lighting improvement project that we've done recently. So I don't really have much more to share on that.
Well,
We
thanks for
appreciate
sharing everything you have shared.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll just kind of move on to the environmental side, and you know, we will open up some stuff at the end too, when we have time. If there's anything lingering at the end, we'll be happy to answer, or after the meeting, or you know, whatever works best for you guys. So on the environmental side, again, you know, we're in regulated waste. So you know, what is regulated waste? You know, typically I always tell people that it's, anything that you can't throw in the garbage. And Steve has a lot more definite answer than that, but this kind of the slide, as you can see the slide here, it just any waste that requires special handling, that can be what they call universal waste, hazardous waste, and that could cover things like I said, light bulbs, ballast, batteries, electronics, appliances, paints, chemicals. Steve, what do you think is from the technical side?
I think one of the things that a lot of people recently have kind of overlooked is they might have a recycling program, they might have a hazardous waste program for their paints and things that they know are hazardous. But there's another category of waste called industrial or process waste, which might be part of a manufacturing process. We cut a little strip off of this plastic and we throw it away, or we do whatever. A lot of those wastes are kind of in this no man's land. They are still regulated, and there's still a burden of proof which generators, manufacturers, and businesses have to provide to the EPA if they're asked, or your local regulators. So there's a lot of times where people kind of say, well, that's just part of making something, and it's not thoroughly vetted, it's not thoroughly tested. And so we can help with that a little bit. Certainly, I think there's a little confusion in that regard, but there's a lot of different technical names that I could get into, just that we have on the slide, or we could even talk about. But they're all very specific definitions. But I think some of it's out of sight, out of mind, just because it's a part of a process, or it's maybe cooling water that goes through a plastic mold or something like that, and then it's just obvious because it's water going in. It's water going down the drain. And we found a lot of generators tend to not realize that they've used that water, that potable water, and then used it through a process. And in that process, it could have picked up various heavy metals. It could have picked up maybe a part of the adhesive or something else, or plastics. And then it needs to be really evaluated before it goes and either is disposed of or maybe goes back down the drain. Maybe it is clean enough for that, but it's one little thing to be aware.
Thanks, Steve. Another question we get is, what is my generator status? And Steve mentioned generator status as generators. So what is a generator, and what is generator status? And then how does it affect this waste that I have?
Yeah, and it's, generator status is a formal definition that the EPA has come up with, and it's really based upon how much waste a customer, a generator, an entity manufactures or generates in one given month or year. So very, very simply put, a very small quantity generator can generate up to 220 pounds of waste per month. Then there's the small quantity generator, which is between 200 and 2,200 pounds, and then a large quantity generator is anything over that. And each level of those statuses comes with a set of responsibilities or trainings or assurances that the EPA will need to see in place, documentation, and so obviously as you generate more waste, there's a lot more management that needs to be done by the company, and there's a lot more burden of proof for the testing and the documentation that you need to keep for training your people, for responding to potential spills, and for disposal of that waste. And it varies a little bit by state to state, but for the most part, the rules are fairly homogeneous throughout the country. States like Minnesota have, again, another layer of rules on top of that, but it's fairly easy to navigate. And if anybody has any questions about that, I can certainly forward them some fact sheets from the government that help explain that pretty well.
Yeah, that's a big thing to mention too, is that a lot of it's, one thing about the waste industry is compared to like the lighting industry. I mean, as a operating business or organization, you are legally responsible to and liable for your waste that you generate. Whereas on the lighting side, it's totally optional, right? I mean, if they work, they work, and so those projects are looked at totally differently from your guys' chair, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, obviously one thing we run across too is big cleanouts from people that don't really have a generator status, and how do you, like a lot of times it's, maybe they don't produce a product, maybe they're a service business that just accumulated stuff over time, and then all of a sudden, they don't have an EPA ID or a status at all. And I guess what's the steps there then?
Well, really, yeah, this does happen pretty often when a company is moving locations, and all of a sudden there's a lot of maintenance chemicals, there's boiler treatment chemicals, boxes of fluorescent lamps, whatever. Sometimes those people accumulated those products under the radar, so to speak. And so there is an app here in Minnesota anyway. It's fairly easy to apply for an EPA-ID number. It's done online. It's quick. It relatively quick. It takes about a couple days to get approved for that number. And there is a temporary number that they'll issue to a one-time cleanout. As far as generator status, they'll pick a generator status, but you're allowed, as of some rule changes in 2017, something called an episodic generation. So it's a situation where once a year you could clean out your facility and ship a large quantity, which would otherwise put you into a larger generator status, like this 2,200 pound large quantity generator. Nobody wants to be that because it comes with a lot of license fees and a lot of training requirements and record retention issues. And those episodic, planned or otherwise, let's say it's unfortunately a spill or a tank that is leaking and now has to be replaced, and so there's a whole bunch of ink or solvent or something. That's a large generation of waste, and those are permitted under the new rules the last 3 years as an episodic, planned or unplanned generation, and that doesn't push you into another a higher generator status with all those responsibilities or fees, as long as you document it thoroughly. And so it's fairly easy to get those things applied for and get, like I say, a good week of online, a couple hours of online work will allow you to get all the stuff ready, all the permits and whatnot.
Okay. Another really simple question we get now, as you guys going through and upgrade your facilities to LED, do the LEDs need to be recycled when they fail? The answer is yes. LEDs, they contain hazardous substances. There's usually lead solder in there. Different metals that can be involved depending on the technology that is there with the fixture or lamp. And in the state of Minnesota, you correct me if I'm wrong here, Steve, but I believe in the state of Minnesota, they kind of fall under that electronics category. Is that correct?
They do. And so the wording in our Minnesota rules is that, does it contain a circuit board? And they do. At least the ones that we've pulled apart here in our recycling facility, we're seeing all of them have a little driver board, is what it's called. And lighting people can speak too much, thoroughly about what it does, but I believe it just changes a voltage to the voltage that and the current that the LED modules need to light the device. So there is a circuit board. It is regulated just like a computer, a desktop computer, or a television, or something else like that.
So yeah. Definitely we need to recycle those if they, hopefully they don't fail for a while on you, Dave. You got a fresh new lighting layout, so hopefully you'll be good for a while, but.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
That does prompt a question. So how long would a lighting panel, LED lighting panel, would we be expected to continue to get service out of that?
Oh, Kristen, you're on mute.
Sorry. It really does depend on the brand that you choose to go with. On a spec sheet, they estimate about 60,000 hours, and they get that number through, a calculation that they've done in the past in conjunction with testing them. But typically by the end of its life, you still would get more than 50% of the light output still performing. We're talking maybe 20 years, right? But a lot of times things fail before that 5-year warranty mark, and it's just a manufacturing issue, whether it's the LED diodes or a driver itself. So, you shouldn't have to worry if you already have them installed. They should perform well if it's a great brand. Again, that's, another thing to bring up too is you know, buying or getting a solution from a company that hasn't been in business for that long, but their warranty is longer than what they've been in business for. I mean, those are things to watch out for. But I don't know, Dave, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Well, Dave, I think what LEDs are rated on is lumen maintenance. So you'll see something on a cut sheet, or if you're doing any research, is called L70, or you may see like an L90 on certain manufacturers. But that just means that the fixtures had 30% lumen depreciation, and that's what the industry has determined as the end of life. So theoretically, kind of what Chris alluded to is you may be at, that's rated at L70 for 50,000 hours or 100,000 hours, but you're still theoretically that unit, because it's electronic, it could have failed long before that, or it can continue to go in perpetuity out for another 50,000 hours. But at a certain point, you're going to have, you started with 40-foot candles in your office area, and now you have 20 or 15. Things still may be operating, they're just not to what the original design was. And then also, like she said, the LEDs may still be operational, but your driver fails. So that would be similar to your fluorescent ballast. You'd have to recycle that, get a new one put in there. Is it compatible at that point? Who knows? But that's the other, I'd say, myth, is that LEDs last forever, right? But there is still a certain maintenance aspect of this. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and then manufacturers typically is a 5-year warranty on material. So if you do have any failure in that first 5 years, make sure you reach out to who you work with on the project. They could help facilitate that warranty. Don't just go and recycle it and go buy another one. Make sure you take advantage of that material warranty. Another popular question now is aerosol waste. In the last couple of years, they've allowed, I guess about maybe a few years ago, in Minnesota, and now recently this year in Iowa, they have changed aerosol waste from hazardous to universal. Steve, there's obviously some different credentials that make that requirement, but can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so universal waste is basically a subset of hazardous waste, and it allows us to manage common wastes a little easier than the hazardous waste rules regularly would. So aerosols being usually filled with a flammable propellant like propane, and then let's say like spray paint, both being hazardous for their flammability. The EPA at a federal level has allowed any state that is willing to accept those rules to manage under some guidelines that allow them to be recycled easier. So we, about 3 years ago, developed it might be going on 4 years now actually, a universal waste aerosol recycling program. So we're one of the first people in the state to come up with that. It allows generators, companies, to ship their aerosol waste, maybe half full, maybe they're clogged spray nozzles, whatever. But a lot of facilities use spray paints or adhesives, and allow them to bring them into our facility where we process them to a level that allows us to send them onto a facility that can actually remove the flammable liquids and recycle them. So they actually recycle the heat content. They're able to safely and effectively capture that propane, use it in industrial processes for power generation, a whole bunch of industrial processes that are approved under the EPA's recycling guidelines. So so since February 20th, nationwide, these aerosol cans have become a universal waste. That doesn't mean that every state has adopted them quite yet. Iowa has. Minnesota was a front runner in that. I just checked with Nebraska last week, and Nebraska still hasn't adopted the federal rules. May not, they've said. So we really have to check with your own state. Obviously, Dave, you're in Minnesota. Both, it sounds like your facilities that you manage are local, so you can take advantage of that program. It can save money. It can also prevent a lot of stuff from going to landfills, and it's an approved EPA recycling methodology. So it's a lot better than the old way that we were doing things, where it was pure incineration and haz waste disposal.
Yeah, and the big part too is that, reduced amount of paperwork. Obviously when you have all waste, all regulated waste has to go on a shipping document, bill of lading. Hazardous waste involves manifests and waste profiles and all the things to document that path all the way to the end processing facility, and then document the fact that it was processed properly, and then back to that generator. So there's a whole paper trail on the waste side. And then in addition to that, there's, DOT has, that's primarily to do with what DOT requires, as well as what that record of proper disposal. So when it's can be moved to a bill of lading, it makes it a lot simpler to properly dispose of them. Then a big question we get, how do we properly prepare and store our batteries for shipment? A couple of questions. Yeah, we have a bonus one at the end. Madison put in there. So batteries are a big one that is you think it's an easy waste stream, but it's actually not. You'll see on the right of this video here, there's a video on our website, and we can share the link to our website, which provides a lot of different information. And if there's time, I can run through a couple. But there's a video where you kind of see the reaction of well, I don't know if it'll play or not, but we'll maybe try it at the end. But they're not packaged properly. Meaning terminals taped, sorted by type. Alkalines are pretty basic, but there's a lot of different lithiums or nickel cadmium, which different batteries that maybe look like alkalines, but they're actually not. And so it's important to package those properly, sort them by type, and tape terminals, anything over 9 volts typically. Like I said, there's a couple different resources. There's a guide that we have, as well as an informative video on what could happen if they're not properly taped, as well as just kind of how to properly tape them. So if there's time, we'll jump into that too. And then finally, the bonus question is something that we get asked a ton, is how do we prepare for a hazardous waste inspection? So in the state of Minnesota, the MPCA would be like the regulator or somebody from your county. And there's a lot of different things that they look for. So Steve, if you could just kind of touch on what a waste inspection is, and if you've never had one, what can they expect?
Yeah, well, the one thing, and I had the fortune to speak with my hazardous waste inspector for this facility today about another matter, and so I got some advice just this morning, and basically, to start today, if you haven't prepared for a hazardous waste inspection, they're really stepping up enforcement, both at an EPA level and Minnesota or the local 7 metro counties. And so start early. The top things that at least Minnesota generators have been cited for recently are using the proper containers, so containers that are compatible with the wastes or the products that are stored in them. Proper labeling of containers, so all the hazardous, whether it be GIHS or it's NFPA, the fire protection rules, or hazardous waste rules. So they're all labeled for those things. That the containers are closed when they're not in use. People leave containers open all the time. Those are the most important things. The things that aren't cited for, but were brought up, know where all your records are. So a lot of people will have multiple things, some things at HR, some things maybe are in the plant manager's office. And during an inspection, it doesn't look real good if it takes 45 minutes, an hour to gather simple paperwork. So really having at least copies stored in one central location is really important. And then the last one, which I thought was a really good thing, and maybe it's something we do here at Retrofit, but it was kind of something I didn't think of to mention, but really hazardous waste generators go through these inspections with a much more favorable result when they implement processes which actually make these adherence to these rules easy. And so making things like copies of the labels that should be filled every time a satellite accumulation container is filled, make a ring binder book for the people that actually do this work, so they can copy over the pertinent information. They know what hazard class label to label on the paint drum or the adhesive drum or that sort of thing. and just making it easy for the facility people, because that is usually the biggest breakdown, is somebody doesn't have time to go look something up. A lot of labels or a lot of containers go unlabeled in facilities, and that's where, like I say, then in the top three things, labeling, proper container, and the container being closed after use are the important things. So
yeah, I think one thing that we've always kind of helped guide our customers is, have some dedicated places in your facility or a dedicated place for these waste streams. Have containers there before the waste is there. That could be a lamp barrel or a 5-gallon DOT bucket, 55-gallon UN rated drum, kind of depending on the waste that you accumulate. And those are things that any, regulated waste service industry, business like us, they can help kind of figure out what you would need. It's good to have that waste storage area labeled with some signage. You can see there on the right, we have a regulated waste storage area with the phone number to call to schedule pickups. Is kind of what we do. And then schedule your self audits, like make sure that people are putting the lid on the container, they are labeling the container, then have a plan, so, maybe it's an annual thing where you go through the flam cabinet and you just get rid of the old stuff, maybe do an annual clean out of your maintenance chemicals, your paints, your stains, your, floor cleaners, your bathroom chemicals, some of those things that seem basic. If you decide you're not going to use them, then they become waste and then they become regulated. So, we've had people that say, hey, I got this Hilliard bathroom, this cleaner that I use in my bathroom and we hate it. I want to get rid of it. Well, it's going to cost you a few $100 and it's going to cost you some paperwork, some time, or you can just use it up, so there's different things like that we can, that you can take into consideration. But, when it becomes expired, the waste can change over time. The containers become more vulnerable for leaks or, different things like that they break down over time, depending on how old they've been there, or how old they are. So that's just kind of different things to think about. Just be aware and have a plan.
I think you bring up a good point. In the last year, we've had 2 generators that were dealing with heating plants, boiler rooms, where they were storing chemicals. It was a place that you could go and safely keep it away from the rest of the facility. But the heat in the facility, in that room or in that area, that heating plant area, was enough to degrade the chemicals quickly. And so we had a couple of issues that really wasn't a factor. They didn't think of that heat was really deteriorating not only the packaging that the chemicals were stored in, but the actual chemicals themselves, to a point where they became more hazardous because of that environment. So just a little place that a lot of people aren't thinking of.
Yeah, and that simple waste stream that could have probably been recycled pretty inexpensively now is a cleanup project that's going to cost you a lot more. Could put you susceptible for fines or compliance issues with an inspector if it were to come that way. So definitely some things to think about. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we have tons of resources. We'd be happy to be a resource for you. We have obviously, I mentioned a few things, and I will just share one screen with you. One last screen with you here. This is our website that you're looking at here. Obviously, whether or not we work with you or do business with you, that doesn't really matter. We still like to be a resource for people looking for answers. And naturally, we feel if we've show we're credible and we'd be that valuable resource, and maybe it will lead to business. But Madison is on the call because she does a lot of work with just trying to make these topics understandable for somebody that maybe doesn't live in this world, like I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. But as you can see here, we have the lighting design, the recycling division, just so there's a lot of different things on either one of those topics we've gone through today. There is, resources on, what's a study, what's included in the study, what things should we be looking for. There's different topics in our blog about, tunable lighting, different things like that. Also chemical waste, like here's a battery video you could check out. with Steve kind of walking through that, some battery guides that you can get into, download, print, leave at your waste storage area. There's different top 40 chemicals that we run into that you can kind of look for those in your facility to make sure that they're not, you're not compiling those and for any sort of time. And just a lot of different topics on both of these things that we cover, both these extremely different industries. So, and of course we have a YouTube channel to make it a better, more easy listening rather than reading through white papers. So we try to make it more fun and more straight to the point and in a more preferable format. So with that being said, I guess I just, it looks like Katie maybe dropped off, but Dave, any feedback on the presentation or any questions that you have on waste or anything? We really appreciate you being interactive with us and helping us along here. Kristen and I being more sales oriented, we like to talk, but we don't want this thing to be real salesy. We just want it to be informative. So I hope you enjoyed it. Do you have any more questions or any other last feedback?
No, not really any questions at this point. I thought the presentation was very informative. It's nice to hear that you are a resource if we have questions for recycling and hazardous waste and things like that. We occasionally do close buildings down, so if I understood you correctly, you might be a resource for helping us to purge some items at some of these facilities that we need to move out of, so that's always good to know. So I appreciate the information, and it was very informative.
Well, thank
to
you.
add a quick note about that too, there is another member, part of IFMA, who's worked with us on some projects in the past too. So if you're interested in ever wanting to learn more about us through another member, I'd be happy to forward on information to you at that point as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, Dave.
You bet.
Yeah,
Thanks, Dave.
thank you, Dave. Good
All right,
talking
have a
with
good.
you.
Yeah, nice talking to you here. I'll turn my camera on so you see what I look like. So
Oh, great. Hey.
yeah, so I've got one of those fancy backgrounds too.
Yeah, nice.
That way you don't see my grandson running back and forth behind me.
I don't know if you noticed Madison's husband corralling the dog behind her there a few minutes ago.
Oh,
It's okay. We all have our lives going on in the background, don't we?
that's for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, we appreciate the time, Dave, and just being part of the thing, and we're glad you joined us. And feel free to use us as a resource. We'll probably drop maybe send us a follow up, just so you have our contact info down the road, and use it as you wish. And thanks a lot for taking the time this morning.
You bet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.
See you.
Have a great day. Thank you.